Storyteller and someone whose journey beautifully connects the past, present, and future of Ferguson, Kelli Hurley.
Thank you so much. That was a lot to live up to. I am incredibly honored and humbled to be here tonight. It is going to be emotional to get through this speech that I have prepared. I had some time before this to speak with some of you, and words that came up a lot, and also what Jen said, is cultures and value and relationship. And that was certainly who my dad was. And for those of you who may not know, my dad was one of the early executives here at Ferguson. He was the senior vice president of human resources, and as a result, I grew up knowing quite a bit about plumbing and toilets, as I'm sure you can understand. But jokes aside, Ferguson is not just a company to me. It is a legacy that my father helped build and shape over 30 plus years. Ferguson was prominent in my life, both as a child and as an adult. As a little girl, I watched my dad give speeches much like this, to rooms much like this, where I would watch the audience respond to his energy and passion. Sometimes there was a little too much passion, though. I don't know if any of you ever got to experience one of his speeches, but he would be sweating, his tie would be disheveled, his shirt untucked, and it was wild to watch him move through the room. And I was like, Dad, are you okay? But I was in awe of him. And I was in awe of what I experienced watching all of you experience him. Now, while I did not have a career at Ferguson, I did work here. I spent some high school and college summers in the file room. Please do not tell anyone, but I did take naps. And I pretended to file very important documents. During my time working at Ferguson, I quickly learned that there were some dramatic differences between my dad and I. For example, during the summer of 1999, I would get into daily fights with my dad over Ferguson's rule that women must wear pantyhose. Yes, this was a rule. Correct, thank you. And I, on behalf of all of you, future women leaders of Ferguson, would rant at him on my way home from the office that this rule was outdated, archaic, and quite unjust and unfair for women. Yes. I like to think my early feminist tirades were a small contribution to this dress code finally being thrown out. You're very welcome. But what this taught me was that I was not afraid to advocate for myself, but also for other women. After graduating from college, I moved to Los Angeles. I had spent the previous summer interning on the critically acclaimed soap opera, The Bold and the Beautiful, and I fell in love with the entertainment industry. And through that experience, I also fell in love with Los Angeles. The weather, come on, the beaches, the mountains, and a big city that felt like endless possibility. I arrived in Los Angeles a few weeks after graduation, started looking for an apartment and looking for jobs and navigating the horrible traffic. My whole life was ahead of me. I was so excited for my life to start. But instead, everything stopped. Exactly 7 days after I moved to LA, my sister called me. A phone call I will never forget. Her young teenage voice screaming for help on the other end. Our mother had died by suicide, and my little sister found her. I was shattered. My world turned upside down, and I was overcome with shock and a pain I did not know could exist. So I went home. But home did not feel like home anymore, and I didn't know where I belonged. Staying home felt like living in the sadness of my mother's death. Returning to LA felt like an escape and a welcome distraction. I chose LA. But I was fraught with grief, and I had no support system, and my dad was understandably worried about me. He pushed me to take a job with Ferguson in Los Angeles because he wanted me to have stability. And once again, I found myself working at Ferguson. I organized plumbing supplies in the warehouse and did some light, very light data entry. But I had come to LA for the entertainment industry, and I wanted to find my way back there. A friend of mine told me about a sales assistant job at Clear Channel Radio. I hadn't thought of radio as part of my entertainment career dreams, but I was desperate for any opportunity where I could break in. I had no experience, and my resume was filled to the brim with a lot of heavily exaggerated Ferguson experience. But I got the interview. I walked into the corner office of the Vice President of West Coast Sales and met Teresa. Teresa was a poised and powerful presence. I knew this was my only shot, and I had come prepared with a PowerPoint presentation to sell Teresa on me. The title of my presentation was Kelli Rosnowski, the premier candidate for premier radio. I thought it was really catchy. From the onset of my career, though, I used my story to forge authentic connection. I packed that presentation full of funny and raw moments from my personal life, convincing Teresa that I was capable, fun to have around, a hard worker, and someone who could overcome tragedy. I got the job. During the early years of my career, I focused on healing through therapy, as well as cultivating a group of friends and colleagues who could provide emotional support as I navigated the tragic loss of my mother. It was this community building that grounded me and helped me discover my ability to succeed in an industry far from the one I grew up knowing. I proved myself as Teresa's assistant, learning quickly, and she soon promoted me to be a media seller. I was realizing the key to my growth was relationship-driven. I was building a strong community of friends around me, along with colleagues and industry peers that made me feel whole and were propelling me forward. My life and career were starting to feel quite stable, but something was missing. After losing my mother, I struggled for years about whether or not I could become a mother myself. I felt such a void, and it took a deep amount of healing work to allow myself to feel that I could take that step. I also worried about what becoming a mother would do to my burgeoning career. But I took the leap, and I joyously welcomed my daughter Scarlett in January of 2015. While on maternity leave, I was asked to go to dinner with the head of sales of Cumulus Media, a direct competitor to my then company, iHeartMedia. None of my clothes fit, and I remember going to that dinner wearing a skirt that would not zip all the way up thanks to my postpartum body. And at that dinner, I was offered the biggest promotion of my career. It was a handshake deal over the table, and it meant giving notice the very next day to iHeart halfway through my leave. They were furious, but motherhood was not slowing me down. Instead, it was giving me new power. In my first year as a mother, I saw an opportunity to transform Cumulus's footprint into an emerging medium, podcasting. Now, we all know what podcasting is here today, or I hope we do, but back then, it was a foreign language, and not many people had heard of it, so people thought I was crazy. But it was just on the cusp of breaking into the mainstream, and I knew in my gut that it had the potential to grow far bigger than anyone could envision. So I began building. I sought out independent podcasters, and I convinced them to work with me. And it worked. What did not work was the support of my then boss. He was an older radio veteran who did not share my vision for the future. He thought the effort compared to the revenue gains were minimal, and I was wasting my time. Well, I didn't listen to him. And I believed in myself because I had witnessed my own father's success here at Ferguson, that he built based on his passion for you, the people, and the culture of this organization. He strove for everyone who worked for Ferguson to treat this not as a job, but as a career that you loved, respected, and enjoyed. I carried those sentiments with me as I too led with passion and grit for something I believed in. I also knew that what I wanted to achieve could not be done on my own. I built strong allies around me who I learned from, gained their trust and respect, and who helped me every step of the way. And guess what? All of those allies were women. My boss and I continued to butt heads. But there was another executive who took notice of me and brought me under her wing. The president of the company, Suzanne. Suzanne was unlike any woman I had ever worked for. She came from the publishing world, and many were intimidated by her, kind of like Devil Wears Prada vibes. I adored her. Her expectations were high, her attention to detail was impressive, and the way she took over a room was powerful, even sophisticated. Suzanne let me fly, and in 5 years, I took our podcast business from 0 to 50 million in revenue. I helped to build and shape an industry that I am incredibly proud of, with relationships and community at the foundation of my success. I was on a rocket ship. It was exciting, exhilarating, and I was fulfilled. My dad was so proud of me during this time. In a way, he was reliving his own experience in early career days with Ferguson, where he got to build something unique and special. He was watching his daughter soar and build a life that was her own. But something was starting to shift. He felt off. He was repeating himself a lot, and he was distant, like he wasn't fully there anymore. My dad was eventually diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. And after 33 incredible years here at Ferguson, he was forced to retire due to his illness. It was a hard moment for him, for all of us. March of 2020 brought the uncertainty and fear of the pandemic. Weeks after the world shut down, I discovered I was pregnant with my second daughter. Navigating a pregnancy coupled with the anxiety around the economic instability the pandemic brought to our work and personal lives was enormous. Constant fears over job security, health, and well-being became my new daily worries. While the behavior of humanity shifted to this new existence, really not surprisingly, podcasting became a respite for many in those uncertain times. My industry soon realized that audiences were flocking to podcasts to combat loneliness and isolation. My business was not just hanging on, but flourishing in a very dark and uncertain time. That January, I welcomed my second daughter, and I named her Hope, as that was what I held on to most through my pregnancy to keep forging ahead. It was only fitting to give her the name of what she represented for me and my family. 6 months after the birth of Hope, my little sister died of an overdose. She left behind 5 young children. I was immediately thrust back to old feelings of instability, grief, crisis, and crushing heartache. The wounds of losing my mother were reopened as I was forced to deal with the tragic and senseless loss of yet another woman in my life. It brought me to my knees. However, it had been 18 years since the loss of my mother, and my life was dramatically different. I was not the same lost young woman who had just left home in search of her own life. I had found stability, partnership, and built a community that showed up for me in big and small ways. My friend Hannah, an artist like my sister, planned her entire memorial from across the country, making my sister's service into an art exhibit of all the beautiful photography she had taken. My friend Chris flew to Virginia to be by my side to execute the service so I did not have to lift a finger. My best friend Shayna took a week off of work and stayed with me, taking things off my plate and making sure I ate and took rest. I was able to stand for my sister's children and her partner because so many people were standing behind me, holding me up with unwavering, impenetrable commitment and loyalty. I was surrounded by the power of the life I had built. My mother's death had felt dark, isolating, and lonely, and while losing my sister was yet another devastating blow, I had an army around me this time, a village who met my battle cry as they stood beside me, marching with me into the dark unknown of traumatic loss. I was going to be okay because they were with me. I would not be here personally or professionally without the support, honesty, and fortitude of others. They have lifted me up so I can stand before you and share my story today. A year after my sister's passing, I was approached by SiriusXM. They had just gotten into the podcast business and were struggling with how to manage their content creators. I was hesitant to make such a big change after the loss of my sister, but despite everything I was feeling, I believed in myself and knew what I was capable of. I joined the company to build an entirely new division, and this team faced many challenges in its infancy, and I was thrust into a highly political and established environment where I was an outsider, needing to prove myself all over again. It was challenging and difficult, creating new complexities I had to overcome in order to not just survive here, but thrive. And once again, I leaned on my ability to forge trusting and authentic relationships. But just as I was beginning to get my feet under me, my dad's Alzheimer's took a turn for the worse, and he was found unconscious in his home after a fall. I flew to his bedside, and it became clear I needed to move him to Los Angeles to be close to me. Once again, my community sprang into action to help facilitate a move of this magnitude in a matter of days. My career had to take a back seat while I became his advocate and caretaker. I knew our time together was limited, and I tried to find small moments of joy and connection in his final stages of this horrible illness. My dad became the most beautiful version of himself in the end. He was so loving, kind, and grateful, and you all will be glad to know that while the illness took his language away, he would often answer with one word when I asked him how his day was. "Dad, how was your day today?" "Ferguson," he would reply with a big smile. When all else was forgotten, Ferguson remained his strongest memory. Shortly after my dad's 69th birthday, my family surrounded him as he took his final breath and passed peacefully away. We read words we had written to him, we let our tears fall on him, and we honored him in a death that was profound and beautiful. It was the kind of passing I wanted for him, for both of us, after experiencing so much tragedy and trauma with the untimely loss of my mother and sister. Through all I have endured, I have continually witnessed and experienced firsthand the complexity we as women leaders face. We carry much of the burden at home, in our communities, in our families, and at work. We carry invisible mental, emotional, and physical loads that our peers cannot see. And yet here we are. We are the caretakers, the schedulers, the nurturers, the cheerleaders, the friends, the wives, the mothers, the aunts, the sisters, the daughters, and in this room, the leaders. It is a lot to hold all at once. But I do not believe any of us got here alone. If we look back over the course of our personal and professional careers, we might all pull forward a person or people who held us close when we were down, guided us when we were lost, or lifted us when we fell. Our greatest power in this room is not in the individual, but in the collective. Look to your left. Now look to your right. How have you supported the person sitting next to you? What could you ask from these women to help support you either now or at a future point in your career? What could someone else do to help make you better, show up stronger, and deliver more for yourself, your family, your community, and your team? We cannot be afraid of vulnerability. Sharing our stories opens us up to be more authentic, supportive, and kind to one another. How does that translate at work? It allows us to let go of the idea that we must operate a certain way in order to succeed. We are all so different with varying degrees of personal and professional challenges we are facing daily. I believe sharing those tragedies and triumphs create greater collective understanding and acceptance. And it is in that acceptance that we can thrive as women, lifting each other up instead of knocking each other down. We've all heard the phrase, "it takes a village." Who in this room can agree with that statement? I know I can. Yes, it does take a village. But I heard something the other day that really resonated with me. If you want to have a village, you have to also be a villager. What does being a villager look like to you? It could be helping someone on your team so they can take time away to heal from a personal issue. It could be bringing a friend or colleague dinner after having a new baby. It could be taking that meeting to mentor someone in their career and giving them advice even when you have a million other things to do. Taking the time for others means they will take the time for you when you need them. On paper, my story is one of tragedy, loss, resilience, pain, and perseverance. It is also one of community, togetherness, collectivism, and vulnerability. The work I must do to continue to cultivate those values, both personally and professionally, remain at the forefront of how I approach my life. When I am knocked down, my village shows up for me. I hope you walk away from tonight feeling a greater connection to everyone in this room, as our leadership and stewardship to build stronger bridges starts here and rests on all of our shoulders. I know I will never forget all of you in this moment. A true full circle where I get to stand before a company my father helped to build and shape. A place he loved, a place that means so much to me. I know he is looking down tonight with a huge grin on his face. He is proud of me, but he is also proud of you. And my hope for all of you is that you find big and small ways to forge stronger professional communities with the women here tonight and beyond. I hope you take the time to mentor and invite the future female leaders of Ferguson to join you, lead with you, and build a lasting legacy built on a shared commitment to support, patience, and empathy. For us all to have a village, we must be the village. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. I would love to get the group together for a picture before we all